what if the ultimate state of inner peace isn't really a spiritual awakening at all? Like, what if it's actually just a biological trick that activates these ancient dormant hibernation genes?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is the big question.
Right. I mean, what if achieving true mental clarity is, well, functionally speaking, a self-induced near-death experience?
It's intense to think about.
Right.
But, we are looking at a deeply fascinating synthesis today for this deep dive. We are crossing all these boundaries, going from ancient Judeo-Christian history through, like, grumpy 19th century German philosophy,
Very grumpy.
extremely grumpy, and then straight into the raw, hard biology of human survival mechanisms.
Hmm.
Because the goal here is to really uncover the underlying architecture of how the human mind achieves absolute tranquility.
Yeah, and for you listening to this, you probably already have, a solid grasp on mindfulness. The basics of meditation, the breath work, the general aesthetic of it all.
Like the typical stuff.
Exactly. But today, we're completely tearing down those conventional boundaries of what we think this practice actually is. We're extracting these core insights from an excerpt of The Science of Meditation, specifically the religion and philosophy section.
Yeah, to map out a universal blueprint for the mind.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this because, to get to the biology, we really have to clear up this massive historical blind spot first. When you talk about extreme physical stillness and mental tranquility, it feels, I don't know, entirely counterintuitive to look at Western religions.
I mean, it does feel that way to most people today.
Yeah, didn't Eastern sages essentially invent this entire framework?
Well, Eastern sages championed the practice with incredible visibility, definitely.
Mm.
But the foundational mechanism of using physical stillness to achieve sacred states, that is universally human.
Right.
If we look closely at ancient texts, like the Old Testament, the exact same practices are literally staring us right in the face.
You're right, really. In the Old Testament?
Oh, absolutely. The ancient Jews utilized very specific linguistic and physical concepts. So there is the Hebrew word hawaka, which translates to murmuring, muttering, or meditating.
Murmuring.
Yeah, it implies this repetitive, almost rhythmic physical action. And then there's suak, which means to muse, bow down, or contemplate deeply in silence.
Oh, interesting. So it's our modern terminology that kind of throws us off here.
Exactly.
When you strip away the contemporary English translation of these texts, you're basically left with an ancient, deeply physical methodology.
That's exactly it. And we see this methodology practically applied by major historical figures throughout the text. I mean, in the book of Genesis, Isaac is famously out in the field practicing suak.
So he's just out there contemplating in deep silence.
Right, immersing himself in deep, silent meditation right before he meets his future wife, Rebecca. And then, decades later, after Moses dies, Joshua receives direct instructions from God to meditate. To Haggai in the Book of Law, day and night.
Day and night. Wow!
Yeah, the instruction isn't just to casually read it. It is to deeply internalize it through constant rhythmic contemplation.
That's wild. And this carries over into the New Testament, too.
It does. Moving into Greek texts, you find words like meletito, meaning to reflect, imagine, or revolve in the mind. The underlying principle across passages in like Philippians, Colossians, and Romans, is that fixing the mind intensely on a single, immovable point dictates the structural reality of who a person becomes.
Huh. So whether it's branded culturally as, prayer or contemplation or reflection, the mechanical core is identical.
Totally identical.
You immobilize the physical body to focus the cognitive mind. I guess the East just approached it with an unmatched level of, scientific rigor.
Yeah, they codified it. They mapped out all the diverse physical methods and built these complex psychological architectures around what actually happens when we stay completely still for hours on end.
Right.
And what's really fascinating here is a specific Eastern framework called Ziguan. It breaks the psychological architecture down perfectly.
Ziguan. Okay, how does that work?
So Z translates directly to stopping or calming thought. You are literally halting the cognitive momentum of the brain.
Just hitting the brakes completely.
Exactly. And Guan translates to observing or exploring truth once that absolute cognitive calm is established. So it is a two-step mechanism: halt the noise, observe the reality.
And the ultimate goal of that observation, the Guan, that shifts entirely depending on the practitioner's worldview, right?
Completely.
Like a Buddhist seeks the profound realization of emptiness, whereas a Taoist looks for the flow of effortlessness. And, I mean, a completely secular person listening to this right now might just be hunting for reduced cortisol levels.
Oh, lower blood pressure, yeah. The philosophical end goals vary wildly, but the mechanism itself is just ruthless in its consistency. You stop the thought to observe the truth.
Stop the thought to observe the truth. I like that.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we can see how this exact mechanism answers a problem that drove Western philosophers completely mad.
Enter the grumpy Germans.
Yes, specifically the 19th century German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer was utterly fixated on identifying the root cause of human suffering.
Light topic.
Very light. But after analyzing the human condition, he basically concluded that all human action is inextricably driven by what he termed the will to live.
Okay, so Schopenhauer is essentially arguing that our fundamental evolutionary survival instinct has just mutated into this endless modern desire.
Exactly. He viewed this insatiable desire for more as an absolute biological curse. He visualized human existence swinging endlessly back and forth like a pendulum.
A pendulum. Okay, walk me through that.
So on one side of the arc, you experience the agonizing visceral pain of wanting something you do not possess. It just completely consumes your thoughts.
Right.
But when you finally acquire that object or status, the pendulum swings to the other side. And the relief you feel, it's microscopic.
Because it instantly degrades into boredom.
Profound boredom.
Yeah.
Yes. You realize the acquisition didn't fulfill you, the boredom becomes unbearable, and boom, a new desire forms. The pendulum swings back to pain.
This translates so perfectly to the modern neurological loop of online shopping. I mean, for anyone listening, think about the exact timeline of buying something you really want.
Oh, it's brutal.
It is. You feel the pain of wanting a new piece of tech. You obsess over the specs, you watch dozens of reviews, you crave the dopamine hit of ownership.
And then you click purchase.
You finally click purchase. The box arrives, you get a massive rush unpacking it. You are thrilled for exactly 48 hours.
If that.
Right. And by next Tuesday, it's literally just another piece of glass and metal sitting on your desk. The dopamine just flatlines. You're completely bored with it, so you open your browser and start scrolling for the next upgrade.
And the pendulum swings back.
It swings right back.
The psychological and biological toll of that endless cycle is just pure exhaustion. And what's crazy is Schopenhauer's diagnosis of human suffering aligns almost word for word with the ancient Buddhist concept.
That all sentient beings suffer precisely because of attachment and unyielding desire.
Exactly. The Western philosopher and the Eastern sages diagnosed the exact same disease. The prescribed cures, however, were wildly different in their execution.
Because if that pendulum is the engine of our misery, I mean, the million-dollar question is how to actually stop it from swinging.
Right.
Schopenhauer offered a couple of Western solutions to halt the pendulum, but realistically, they sound incredibly demanding, almost punishing.
They really are.
Yeah.
His first proposition was aesthetic contemplation.
Meaning art.
Yeah, immersing yourself completely in profound works of art, like a masterful painting or a complex symphony. The theory basically relies on the distancing effect of art.
Oh, I see.
By losing yourself in the genius of a creator, you're momentarily pulled out of your own ego and your physical cravings. You enter what philosophers call a transcendent world of ideas.
Effectively escaping the gravity of your own desire.
For a moment, yeah.
Which works beautifully for an hour until, the symphony ends, you walk out onto a noisy street, you smell a restaurant, and bam, the pendulum kicks right back into gear.
Right, it functions as a temporary cognitive anesthetic. It's not a systemic cure. And Schopenhauer recognized the limitations of art, so he offered a second, infinitely more extreme path.
Which is?
Asceticism. This is the use of sheer brute force rational willpower to crush all desire.
Yikes.
Yeah. If desire is the bridge connecting your fundamental will to live with your actions, asceticism demands you violently sever that bridge. Strict self-denial, fasting, poverty, absolute intellectual control over your biological urges.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. Schopenhauer is demanding a combative, highly rational fight against human nature.
Right, in the battle.
To me, his version of asceticism is like trying to fight off a swarm of angry bees with your bare hands.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
You're just out there throwing punches at your own desires, swatting away cravings, expending massive amounts of psychological energy, and realistically, you're still going to get stung. It is exhausting.
Totally exhausting.
But the Eastern approach of meditation offers this brilliant biological loophole. Instead of fighting the swarm of bees, you just calmly walk over to the switch and turn off the lights so the bees go to sleep.
That is exactly it. And the human physiology backs up that analogy flawlessly. Ancient Eastern thinkers fundamentally understood a biological reality.
Which is?
Our desires do not just spontaneously generate from the ether. They are heavily reliant on continuous sensory input. What we see, hear, taste, touch, and smell constantly seeds the cognitive loop of wanting.
Oh, wow. So meditation bypasses Schopenhauer's rational fight entirely.
Entirely. It doesn't ask you to philosophize your way out of wanting things. It asks you to maintain sharp, waking consciousness while allowing the physical body to simulate the physiological state of duck sleep.
You're manually shutting down the hardware so the software stops running.
That's a perfect way to phrase it. As profound physical stillness sets in, the sensory nerves systematically dial down their bandwidth. The auditory and visual processing centers in the brain quiet down.
Right.
And by physically removing the sensory environment that desires require to exist, the desires simply dissolve on their own.
Because they have no fuel.
Exactly. You aren't wrestling your ego into submission. You are starving it of the sensory oxygen it needs to survive. It perfectly embodies Sun Tzu's famous military maxim.
Oh, the greatest victory is that which requires no battle.
Precisely.
The greatest victory is that which requires no battle.
I love that.
Yeah.
By refusing to engage the desire at the sensory level, you win by default.
You do.
But, okay, if we follow this logic all the way down the rabbit hole, if meditation is mimicking sleep by shutting down the nervous system, what happens when someone takes that extreme physical stillness to its absolute biological limit?
Yeah, that's where it gets heavy.
Right, because it forces us to confront the heaviest philosophical concept there is: death. It does. And to properly navigate the concept of pushing physical stillness to the edge of death,
Yeah.
we really have to look at Socrates.
Okay, another classic grumpy philosopher.
Well, maybe less grumpy, but definitely intense. Socrates is famous for many philosophical breakthroughs, but perhaps nothing is more legendary than how he faced his own execution by the Athenian state.
Because he drank poison, right? Hemlock.
Yes, hemlock.
Yeah.
And he didn't panic. He didn't beg for his life. He didn't try to flee. He engaged in this calm, highly analytical debate with his weeping students right up to the very moment he drank it.
I mean, for anyone listening to this, maintaining a perfectly calm, analytical mindset while your body literally shuts down from poison is practically superhuman.
Yeah.
How did he bypass that basic, hardwired biological terror?
He achieved it through a radical interpretation of the relationship between the physical body and the soul. In Plato's Phaedo, Socrates argues that the physical body, heavily laden with its sensory cravings, illnesses, and, biological imperatives, acts as a severe distortion filter. Yeah, it actively prevents the intellect from perceiving pure, objective truth. He makes the incredibly provocative claim that the true philosopher does nothing but practice dying and being dead.
Okay, so what does this all mean? Because practicing dying sounds intensely morbid, almost pathological.
It does sound morbid at first glance.
Why would anyone actively simulate death just to find inner peace?
Well, this raises an important question, and the answer is deeply rooted in an involuntary physiological chain reaction that occurs during advanced stages of meditation.
To biology again.
Right back to the biology.
Yeah.
When a practitioner maintains total, unbroken physical stillness for a prolonged period, they effectively hack the central nervous system.
How so?
The body relies on proprioceptors. These are sensory receptors located in the muscles and joints, and they help the body understand its position in space.
Okay, yeah.
But when there is zero muscle activity for hours, these proprioceptors stop sending signals. And because of this sensory void, the unconscious brain makes a logical assumption. It assumes the physical body has fallen asleep.
Oh, so it misinterprets the voluntary stillness as actual sleep, even though the consciousness is fully awake and observing.
Exactly. And once that neurological assumption is made, a massive systemic shift occurs. The brain actively inhibits the sympathetic nervous system, which is the network responsible for your fight or flight adrenaline responses.
Right.
Simultaneously, it heavily stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, locking the body into a profound rest and digest state. Heart rate variability increases and blood pressure drops.
But wait, a master practitioner who has been sitting motionless for 10 hours, they push way past a basic rest and digest state, right? They keep going.
Oh, they push it to the absolute edge of human biological capability. If the profound stillness continues indefinitely, the unconscious brain is forced to make another, much more extreme evolutionary leap.
What does it do?
It detects such a profound lack of sensory, motor, and metabolic feedback that it assumes the organism is facing an extreme environmental threat, like severe famine or freezing temperatures. So it enters a dormant survival state. The body begins to express dormant hibernation genes,
Wait.
genetic sequences that have been largely inactive in humans for millions of years.
Like literal hibernation mechanisms, exactly like a bear surviving a brutal winter.
Functionally, yes.
That is insane.
The physiological cascade is staggering. Respiration slows to an almost undetectable crawl. Core body temperature drops. The heart rate and metabolic rate plummet to fractions of their normal output. The organism approaches a state that medically mimics clinical shock or near death.
Wow.
So the biological essence of achieving nirvana, the ultimate state of enlightenment and liberation, is essentially a self-induced, highly controlled near-death experience.
It's a sensation of hovering on the absolute razor's edge of biological life, just bathed in total sensory silence.
Exactly.
That is a staggering realization. When Socrates says a philosopher practices dying, deep meditators are biologically executing that exact process.
They are flirting with the void.
They really are. But
Yeah.
let me challenge the utility of this for a moment. Because how does systematically shutting down your vital organs and hovering on the edge of the abyss make your day-to-day life, like your relationships, your work, your reality, any better?
That's a great point. And the 20th century philosopher Martin Heidegger provides the perfect framework to understand the utility of this.
Yeah.
Through his concept of being towards death.
Being towards death. Okay.
Heidegger posited that the vast majority of human anxiety, stress, and neuroticism is ultimately rooted in a subconscious terror of non-existence. We are terrified of the end.
Obviously.
Right. But if you take death into your daily life, if you deliberately simulate it, observe it, and become intimately familiar with that physical threshold through deep meditation, it ceases to be a terrifying, abstract void.
It becomes familiar.
It becomes a deeply familiar landscape. It becomes an old friend.
Oh, wow. You completely drain the concept of death of its power to terrorize you.
Exactly. And by removing that foundational existential terror, you are liberated from the trivial anxieties of daily life. It echoes Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy that integrating life's harshest severities makes us psychologically robust.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Literally. When a master meditator faces an actual life-threatening crisis, or even just the natural moment of their passing, there is no biological panic. They have visited that frontier 1,000 times. They are simply crossing a familiar threshold.
This completely flips the script on why people seek intense mental stillness. Stripping away that ultimate fear doesn't turn you into some emotionless zombie. It makes you infinitely more vibrant.
Exactly.
If you aren't unconsciously expending massive amounts of mental energy just being terrified of your own mortality, you can actually be present. You can be fully alive, more creative, more empathetic, and entirely engaged with the people around you right now.
Heidegger argued exactly this point. The entire purpose of confronting mortality, his concept of being towards death, is fundamentally and ultimately for the sake of being alive.
Man, we have covered a massive amount of conceptual ground today. We've traced the ancient Judeo-Christian roots of physical stillness. We've dissected Schopenhauer's exhausting pendulum of human suffering,
The swarm of bees.
the swarm of bees, and we plunged into the extreme biology of hibernation genes and self-induced physiological shutdowns. But there's a vital, highly practical question we really have to answer before we wrap up.
Let's hear it.
What are you, the listener, actually supposed to do with this profound knowledge in your own life?
Right. How do we apply it? Well, we have to return to Socrates one final time to see the ultimate application of this integration.
Okay.
Socrates wasn't just a theorist tossing out morbid analogies about dying. His philosophy and his biological reality were completely aligned. When he was condemned to execution, his wealthy followers actually bribed the prison guards.
Really? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. They gave him a clear, heavily funded, completely easy path to escape Athens and live out his remaining days in comfortable exile.
He had the ultimate out, a guaranteed escape hatch, and he flatly refused to take it.
He chose to drink the hemlock. And he did this to demonstrate what he called the unity of knowledge in action.
Unity of knowledge in action.
He had spent his entire life discovering these profound truths about the soul's independence from the physical body. And he refused to let his final, base biological instinct for survival betray those truths. He stood his ground to prove to his students that his philosophy wasn't just an intellectual exercise, it was his ultimate reality.
I mean, that is a staggeringly intense level of conviction.
It is.
But if we're looking at how to safely apply this to our own modern lives, that level of rigidity feels almost dangerous.
It is dangerous, and that danger provides a deeply necessary counterbalance to this entire discussion. Is it truly worth sacrificing your physical existence to defend a rigid philosophical doctrine or a supposed absolute truth?
Right, because we live in a world entirely saturated with competing ideologies, scientific theories, and religious certainties.
Exactly. So how tightly should we really grip our own paradigms? The British philosopher Bertrand Russell provided a brilliant, highly necessary antidote to Socrates' extreme conviction.
What did he say?
Russell famously stated, "I would never die for my beliefs because I might be wrong."
I might be wrong. I love that. That is the perfect grounding statement.
It really is.
It completely deflates the ego. It gives you permission to explore these intense, profound depths of your own biology and psychology without ever becoming dogmatic about the results. It's just this reminder to hold your philosophical beliefs, no matter how deep or revelatory they feel in the moment, lightly.
It represents the ultimate intellectual humility. You can pursue profound inner truth through intense world-altering meditation, while simultaneously acknowledging that human understanding of the universe is inherently flawed, always incomplete, and constantly evolving.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final thought to mull over, something that builds on the incredible biology we've unpacked today, but maybe pushes it just a little bit further.
I'm ready.
We established that deep, sustained meditation systematically drops your heart rate, plummets your metabolism, and tricks your central nervous system into a state of biological hibernation.
Right.
But if your physical hardware is running at a mere fraction of its normal speed, what happens to your mind's perception of time?
Oh, wow. That completely alters the equation of human experience.
Right. I mean, think about moments of extreme adrenaline, like a car accident or a sudden fall. The brain processes so much information that time seems to physically stretch and slow
Right,
down.
Vapor dilation.
Exactly. So if you master this profound physical stillness, if you practice this daily mini-death, where your vital signs drop to an absolute crawl, your internal biological clock must fundamentally shift.
It has to.
By slowing your cellular biology down to the absolute limit, could you actually be expanding your mind's perception of the present moment?
That is fascinating.
By practicing dying, could you essentially be living a much longer, infinitely richer, and deeply expansive existence entirely within the exact same chronological lifespan?
It completely redefines what it means to spend your time on this earth.
It really does. It's something to deeply think about the next time you decide to sit quietly, close your eyes, and just turn off the lights. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.